This is Hokulea, a kind of time machine. Although its design is ancient, it's crafted with modern materials. This replica of a 1,000-year-old Polynesian vessel has helped our modern world better understand and respect the first explorers of the Pacific. As a symbol, Hokulea speaks to the future and the struggle by Polynesians to affirm their unique cultural identity and participate in the world on their own terms. Our voyage with Hokulea takes us to French Polynesia, the Cook Islands, and New Zealand, or roughly the first half of the canoe's historic 2-year, 16,000-mile journey, which traced ancient migration routes and rediscovered wayfinding skills that allowed Polynesians to travel the vast Pacific without navigational instruments or written language. As with ancient canoes, sailing of Hokulea requires the commitment and hard work of an entire community.
Ke hoʻola nei au o ke ia Hōkūleʻa, ma kainoa o ka makua, a o ke keiki, a me ka uhane he malele. Amen.
Polynesian Voyaging Society members are motivated by many factors: romance of sea adventure, love of history, and pride of heritage. Crew member Ty Crouch.
Hokulea is bringing part of a lost culture back, and the people of the South Pacific may even feel a little bit more intense about it than the people here, since they still can retrace their roots a little bit better. This is a living culture, so the culture is not completely dead, but there are elements that are gone that can be recreated, and Hokulea, as part of an educational venture, can not only teach us, but also inspire children and keep this alive.
French Polynesia of the 1980s is a far cry from the images of tranquility once captured by Gauguin. The island of Tahiti has become a major population center, and its natural beauty is often in conflict with the realities of modern life. Questions of French colonial policy, including an active nuclear testing program, and increasing pressure for full economic participation, provide issues for Polynesian political debate. Gaston Floss is a former president of French Polynesia and now serves the metropolitan government as Minister for South Pacific Affairs.
La dénucléarisation, c'est bien. D'autres grands principes, c'est également très bien. Mais je crois que nos peuples désirent surtout mieux vivre. Et pour nous, c'est un progrès social, c'est le développement économique. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle je dis et je veux concrétiser cela. Les véritables problèmes de la Polynésie sont des problèmes économiques et sociaux. En 2 ans, 3 ans que nous sommes au pouvoir, nous avons fait beaucoup sur le plan social, reste le plan économique, et là également nous faisons énormément. Il y a beaucoup d'investisseurs qui viennent en Polynésie. En 2 ans, nous aurons doublé notre capacité hôtelière. Nous avons un système fiscal qui vraiment favorise les investissements. Ils sont les bienvenus.
In 1963, after the independence of Algeria, the French government has decided to experiment the bomb here in Tahiti. And a lot of private enterprises came here, and they got good wages. So the Tahitian people have quitted fishing, planting. They came here in Wha'a. You know, in 1963, we were about 2,500 people living in Fa'a. Now we are nearly 23,000 people. They came here to find out jobs, easy jobs, good wages, and they are renting a parcel of land. And now they are living in a very precarious situation because they are still renting land, renting house, and most of them are jobless. All those people are starting now, you know, to think about returning to the outer islands, living of, you know, fishing, planting. We still know how to go fishing, how to plant, and all those things. But if we disappear, the new generation will lose everything.
No matter whose vision prevails for the political future of French Polynesia, the tiny island of Anaa in the Tuamotus illustrates some practical problems. Like other low islands, Anaa is vulnerable to wind and wave. Storms completely destroyed the island in 1983. All 450 residents were left homeless. The decision was made to rebuild a model, storm-proof solar community. Every one of Anaa's 97 houses was relocated for protection from the sea and designed to withstand hurricane wind. Photovoltaic cells and storage batteries make this an electric village. Life will still depend on a combination of fishing, subsistence farming, periodic copra harvest, and sale of handcrafts. It is hoped that solar electrification and a lifestyle complete with domestic appliances will reduce desires to migrate to the already overextended urban wage economy of Tahiti. Island residents are proud of their new high-tech existence, and it's unclear what impact this new environment might have on perpetuation of customs traditionally handed down from parent to child. However, this Italian film about the American West, dubbed in French, is also part of Anaa's changing reality and may pose a bigger threat than wind or wave.
All the people of this area, Pacific, South Pacific, improve their identity, their cultural identity and their cultural heritage. Some of them less problems than others because their culture is still en bon état, yeah, in good shape, yeah. For some of them, it's more difficult because they have lost a big part of their culture.
Every year, about 4 or 5 groups go in and through the world making promotion, touristic promotion. Have nothing to do with it, right? That's dancing only. Just showing a pair of tits or showing a pair of bump, okay? And say that's Tahitian. Okay, it pleases. It's not my purpose. When I was a kid, 8 years or 9 years old, it was formally prohibited to speak Tahitian at school, formally. And the kids were punished for that. We have these stories of shells. Remember the story of the shells? Like I caught you speaking Tahitian, I give you the shell. So you have to make somebody else speak Tahitian and give him the shell, and the one that comes back in the classroom with the shell gets punished, you see? All kind of structures that can be developed around that. But for about 15 years now, Tahitian is back to school. So I imagine, even though somebody told me a terrible thing that within 50 or 60 years your language is going to die, I don't agree with that. I think that more and more people are able to understand and think through their own language.
The church has played an interesting role in perpetuation of Tahitian language. Polynesians had no forms of writing. It was early 19th century English missionaries that first fixed Tahitian words on paper. They produced a Tahitian grammar, Bible, and later a dictionary that are still used by scholars for clues to words and meaning. Missionaries also changed the language, introducing English, Latin, French, and discouraging words thought to be pagan. However, recruitment of indigenous clergy and celebration of worship in Tahitian were an affirmation of its worth, providing a place for native speakers and language appreciation, even while Tahitian was discouraged and banished from school.
When the former government in 1975 decided to protect our language, it created our Academy of Tahitian Language. And from that time, we work with the Bible of missionary, English missionary. It is for us a reference for our language, because this Bible has been written in 1835. And nowadays, we have finished complete grammar of Tahitian language. And when we finish this grammar, we have now planned a dictionary, a complete dictionary.
The people here who have been invaded by the Western civilization and culture, pop music and so on, they don't feel happy and at home. So there's always this urge to switch back, to go back to your native roots. And every day we speak the language because it refers to our way of life, our food, our way of dressing, our climate, our way of pleasures and enjoying, you know. So it's very, very deeply rooted in our everyday life.
Because we are too French. We learn too much French since we are born. We used to being in the French culture.
Do young people like yourselves try to speak
Yes,
anything?
we all want to know our language and our culture.
Why is that important?
Because it's our country, and we are proud of it.
If we, French Polynesian people, in our corner, if the Hawaiian on the north corner, if the Maori in the south corner, work together and help each other for that resurrection of our language, I think we can hope something very interesting and very important.
If we don't organize, if we are not well conscious of the fact that people are losing more and more of their traditions, and we don't do anything to offset that, you're right. We may be We may be lost, we may be without any identity and just go adrift in this Western civilization.
The whole Polynesian people working in the same way for language and for culture in general. The Hokulea is really a symbol for our Tahitian people, and I think for the whole Polynesian people, because it's a canoe. The canoe is really a common value in our Polynesian culture. And in my mind, the canoe is really the only thing pour réunir, to unify the Polynesian people. And Hokulea is really that symbol.
Now, my job's to point the canoe, but if the crew can't keep it pointed in the direction I want, we're not going to make a landfall. They come from all walks of life. We have a lawyer and a number of doctors and construction workers and an architect and fishermen, and a lot of them are not really associated with the ocean very closely. There's no real failure as long as everybody survives it safely. The only real failure is not to go and try.
If you think that a small group of islands in the middle of the South Pacific can somehow escape the problems of the 20th century, a visit here to the Cook Islands would prove you wrong. It would also be wrong to assume that this tiny nation of 17,000 could not stand up to the forces of change. Cook Islanders have struggled both to maintain their unique Polynesian identity and to participate fully in the modern world.
The Cook Islands rely on New Zealand for matters of defense and some financing, but are self-governing in most aspects of national life. Cook Islanders are proud of having hosted the historic gathering of Pacific leaders that drafted the Treaty of Rarotonga, an agreement that seeks to establish a nuclear-free zone and limit the proliferation of nuclear weapons and waste. Former Secretary of Foreign Affairs John Jonasson recalls negotiations leading to the treaty.
There is a range of views, ranging from movement of nuclear ships to even right up to the movement of spaceships. So it's a very wide range of problems, and various countries have different opinions. And I think basically after some tremendous efforts by various countries, all of the officials representing the various countries, we do have something that is on paper that we think looks good.
Member of Parliament Jeffrey Henry sees no reason why traditional culture cannot coexist with modern technology.
Well, I don't think for one moment that there is any conflict at all between the importation of advanced technology and retention of those things which make us Cook Islanders, which make us special people, which make us different from others. I don't need advanced technology, for example, to teach me how to dance the Cook Islands way. nor to beat the drums the way that only Cook Islanders can, nor to indeed make the canoes that we make ourselves, or to fish in our own way of fishing. But I need a computer to help me be more productive in my work. I think it is important that we don't lose our culture. I think it's important that Cook Islanders be Cook Islanders, and I don't think a computer is going to change that.
I think this is where the education process within the system becomes very important. And I think at large, the Cook Islanders have a very broad perspective. They take things as they come.
Pēnei kua mate, pēnei kua ngaro atu ki te tai enua ke. Nō reira, me ere tātou nārunga i te waka i te tuatau mua. E ato rātou au kawenga? Koe te rākite aki te mai? Koe te ingo i tō rātou waka? Ah, e waka o te. E waka papa a me e waka Maori. E a koe karangai e waka Maori?
If you do not know your language, I don't think you will know the second language. You have to know yourself first, know what your culture, your customs and everything before you learn other language. Well, Maori is our basic language. The first day the child comes to school, there'll be everything will be Maori in the classroom. Just maybe a little bit of English. When we started off, well, Maori is all right through the classes. Some people think that they send their children to school to learn English. Now, if we teach them Maori, they say, no, we want English, but they didn't understand. But, through the teacher and parents, and we tell them that they have to know their own culture. They have to know their own language before we learn other people. What's the use of learning the culture of New Zealand? They don't even know their own.
This is tuoro, which translated means stand and run. In fact, tuoro is not only this place, but the areas within the vicinity of Tuoro itself. But most locals today refer to this place as Black Rock. Now, it is believed that this particular spot is the spot in which, when you die, your spirit comes here and you cast off, saying your farewell to Rarotonga and head back to Awaiki, as we call it. Now, this particular place has a lot of relationships as well to a lot of our legends. And it's also believed by many of the locals to be haunted, that the spirits are still very much alive
in this spot.
In this very spot right here. And very interestingly, a lot of incidences have occurred right up to recent times. Many of the accidents, very fatal ones, have occurred here. People swimming, fishermen out in the ocean, accidents on the road, which is just, as you know, about 4 or 5 yards, just past beyond the trees. And it scares a lot of people. My own view is that it's so much better when you tell stories about your own folklore to your children, rather than telling them about Cinderella, Snow White. I mean, it's good to tell them about Cinderella and Snow White, but we have our own versions which they can identify with so much easier, and I think gives them the personality that they probably ought to have.
In addition to a strong culturally oriented school curriculum, an annual national competition involving music, dance, legends, and oratory is kind of a World Series of culture that helps stimulate national pride. Some critics fear that standardized choreography and regimentation will kill natural elements. But proponents point to standards of excellence as a result of competition, and the public recognition received by contestants as important factors in maintaining interest in Cook Island culture. These competitors hail from tiny Atiu Island, 130 miles from Rarotonga.
If they want to win, they got to start way back in January, and that's looking at 6 months. Every island is doing the same, and it's our major competition in the form of culture festivals, and it's the only prestigious one. If you want to win it, you have a name. So everybody tries very hard. We are used to living in a much more extended family style, and everybody is together. But if the Western lifestyle appeals to the young people, then it's very hard to keep them in, and they start to move away, drift apart, and that's not very good to us.
Atiu Island leaders have sought economic diversification, introducing pineapple cultivation and a coffee industry in attempts to create jobs and stem the flow of outmigration, which has reduced the population to 1,200. In recent years, Atuans have organized efforts to collect and preserve their culture and tradition in written form, a recognition that cultural awareness shares importance with economic concerns in creating quality of life. Akitairi was a powerful woman leader of Atiu. This chant is an incantation calling on her god to weaken her husband so that he could not make love to another woman.
Te pepe tai ara nuku, te pepe tai ara tai. Taeanga ki te ata piere arongo te ariki. Ake tu, ake tu.
Legends and genealogies serve to link today's population with both their ancestors and the land. The sacred Marae Orongo was the place that chiefly leaders once came to consult their gods. Atuans call themselves the worms of the land, in recognition that they are born of the soil and return at death. The bones of great ancestors are visible and respected in burial caves, where they've been placed in canoes with favorite possessions.
We are aware of legends that are disappearing. In the villages or in gatherings in the villages, the oral way of passing or imparting the old stories is still going on. We have to collect it by taking recordings and taking notes from our old people.
The Tumunu, or bush beer school, is both old and new. Brewing of beer only began in the 1850s, but the social institution has its origins in the ancient kava ceremony, which was stamped out by the early missionaries. Given the missionary attitude to both kava and alcoholic spirits, it is somehow fitting that drinking sessions begin with prayer. Even though homebrew is illegal, these institutions based on indigenous ritual have survived and flourished. A respected elder called the Pu Kava, or Kava chief, is responsible for maintaining discipline. Membership is open only to men, and there are elements of both the village pub and the classroom.
Not only drinking, well, there are other things, you learn from drinking. Sharing ideas, their skills, of course. One man would say, hey, this is the time, this is a very good fish of the moon, good for fishing, that sort of fish, that sort of fish. And if there is about something else about growing, planting, well, they talk about that too.
A women's organization has been formed to provide mutual support and cultural instruction.
their culture will help them to get food for themselves, to plant the land, to make their own mats for the children, for the families.
I left Aitutaki when I was 12 years old. And at 12, you're just beginning to understand some of your local customs, and you're beginning to learn from your parents and from your elders the phases of the moon, the nights to go fishing, the nights to plant, the days to plant kumara, when, what time, and so forth. I never got to learn these things. Instead, I learned how to speak English, how to count, and so forth, in Maori, New Zealand.
Tangaroa te titi, tangaroa te tata. Eu wā kia nara te rangi. Kia tai atu te wakaoru, kiu tai tēnu. I reira, wa marino te tai. Wa tinga te moana. Wa aere mai te wakaoru, wa kaurunga mai, kirunga te ao kau, I o otu nei.
Papa Tunui recalls that the explorer Ru needed help from Tangaroa, who calmed the seas and permitted his landing on Aitutaki. The oral culture depended on memory, aided by chants and dances, to preserve history. Aitutaki orators of today can still trace their genealogies back to the discoverer Ru and the first settlers of their island.
I had always made a commitment to come back to the Cook Islands. So I had to read, learn, and listen very carefully to people like Nui when they make speeches at the ceremonial functions which occur on the island. I observe very carefully and I listen very carefully to the chants and so forth. And that's really how I've learned to become a Cook Islander.
Ora tu koe ki te ala I nunga I tuale a kia iri te matangi, hare bure bue. Kia ta iri te matangi, hare bure bue. Tai runga maunga pu, tai runga maunga pu. Tai iri te matangi, tai iri te matang. Runga maunga pu, tai runga maunga pu. Tai iri te matangi, tai iri te matang. Tai iri te matangi, tai iri te matang.
Mungapu, Aitutaki's highest hill, is linked in legend to Rarotonga's Black Rock and the mountain Reimaru.
Legend has it, or at least this version of the story, Aitutaki, or Araura Enua as was the old name of the island, had no mountains at all. So they decided to come to Rarotonga and borrow one of the mountains here. And it happened one long, dark night. They chipped away at the mountain and they carried it, and parts of the mountain fell along the way, and it is said that this tuoro here is where some of the parts of the mountain fell as they were carrying it. And very interestingly, if you go to Aitutaki today, they have one hill there which they call the top of the mountain, Mungapu.
Tipi tipi tipi. Maunga tipi I ara te atu ako Tangaroa ko lae maru. A tipi tipi. Kia ora o te unga mate po tik, a tipi tip. Maunga peke peke I te uri I horo e ngai, tapa atu eina ki taako kamatu oro, a tipi tip. Maunga peke peke I te uri I horo e ngai, tapa atu eina ki utataki enue.
It's not surprising that Rarotongans living in the shadow of Reimaru have a different version of their lost mountaintop. They say the mountain was too tall, blocking the sun, bringing constant rain and misery to their district. The villagers' prayer to chop it was answered, and the god Tangaroa dumped the mountaintop debris on Aitutaki.
You are best known in your community by how much you know of your own people and by how much you recognize your relatives. By being able to relate yourself to everybody else around you. Your knowledge of your district's history, the legends that are the ones which make your district proud, you've got to know those legends. That's how you identify yourself.
In a Polynesian setting, belonging to a family, belonging to a clan around the family, belonging to a tribe, belonging to a district. These things are drummed into us. It becomes an inborn aspect of our lifestyle. We belong, we also share. I know in New Zealand because I was brought up there too. And I see the ones, you have to save your money. You have to work according to time. You have to know when to spend and when not to spend. Over here, it's a different lifestyle again. Because being a small island and possessing all these natural gifts from the sea and from the land that we don't really need to extend.
The Ngāti Uri Taua tribe prepare to welcome Hōkūleʻa.
This Hokulea trip is one of a traditional, it's a historical moment for us down here as a Polynesian. Everybody works together. It's just like, it's a custom for us down here. If I, the chief, go around my people, my tribe, and say, look, I want you to give me a pork, a pig, chicken, but we've got to share equally. Everybody will cooperate. Function like this, that's when the young ones comes in. When there's no function, the young ones will never bother coming. But now, the young ones, our children will come and say, oh, Father, what's that for? What are you preparing this for? That's when they hear all the that traditional way of whatever American custom we were doing.
The Hokulea is very much alive. Its history. It's a living form of museum. It's another story. It's a path that's been relived again, according to the ancients. The roots. Hōkūleʻa is Polynesia. Hōkūleʻa is Moana Nui o Kiwa. Hōkūleʻa is the papa, the foundation. Hōkūleʻa, te rangititi, the high heavens, the vastness. Hōkūleʻa is all encompassed around these because you see with your own eyes it's living.
The sun is, at that time of the year, is really ideal for holding bearings for long periods of time during the day. Then in the middle of the day when the sun's too high that it's not, you can't practically use it for a bearing anymore. We use the swells pretty much. Certain clouds you can use, the real high ones very far away you can use for rough bearings. It's more like you sail in a general direction, just get through that portion of the day, the hard steering, then use the sun in the afternoon and stars at night.
The navigator was usually called a whale. The implication being, of course, that he was not only big, like the whale, but that he traversed great expanses of ocean. Carving has many aspects, as I said, the mythological, the traditional aspect, the stories about the people, their voyages to New Zealand, their battles, their loves, their hates, their joys, fear, pain, all those sorts of things.
What you're seeing here is the beginnings of a traditionally styled Maori marae in the heart of an academic institution, the University of Auckland. We felt that there was a need to teach Maori in an authentic setting, a tūranga waiwai built on traditional lines.
The concept of Turanga Waiwai, or place to stand, predates the arrival of the Pakeha, or European in Aotearoa, as New Zealand is known by the first people of the land. The marae proper consists of an open space of ground in front of an ancestral meeting house. Together, they were the focal point of village life. Rituals and protocols of challenge and welcome were developed to identify enemies and embrace tribal relatives and friends. The marae is also the place for observance of the important life cycle passages, providing tribal continuity and linkages between present and past. It is an institution for the airing of ideas, a place of oratory and tribal decision-making that has become increasingly important in modern life. Maori are now a minority in their own land, and the marae, with its traditions, a place of strength and security, where Maori, not Pakeha values, are dominant. Urban Maori have created new marae in order to recapture the sense of community important to Maori life.
Our people had universities. This house has the canoe ancestors and the priests representing what we call the wānanga, or the houses of learning, where the principal method of learning, of education, was through rote learning. And this developed into a series of incantations, chants, prayers. Our people had a genius for personification. Even abstract things were personified. Areas of learning, areas of nature, the sea, everything. And so they carved them.
Our carvings and weaving would be our form of video. Books, unfortunately, do not capture the wairua, the spirit of what has been woven and what has been carved. And you can only capture the spirit when you see it actually on the walls of the house. Just in the same way a camera can give you an idea of the depth of feeling of people or the way things are, that books cannot.
It's extremely difficult for oral tradition to survive in what has become very literary, westernized type of Aotearoa that we live in now. And I saw a way through it. I saw that film is a very visual medium. It doesn't necessarily have to be literary. You merely have to watch. You observe and you see images. Now, in the Polynesian mind, in the imagination and in that collective consciousness that we have, the image conjures up a memory from the past that speaks to the future. This is what we believe. I have a right to stand here. I have a right to use whatever technology or methodology there is for the benefit of the Maori people.
We want this house to stand because this is the basis of our pleas. Give our land back.
The special relationship that Maori people have to the land is the same relationship they have to their own mother. The analogy is of a person with their mother. The link is essentially a spiritual umbilical cord that Maori people recognize. In other words, we are not divorced from the land, we are part and parcel of the land.
In 1950, I was 10 years of age when we became the only tribe in this land to be landless in our own country. The national government at that time confiscated the last remaining burial grounds of our people and systematically went around burning our houses and bulldozing our marae down. I saw our people die of not physical causes, but of spiritual causes.
The spiritual values directly cement the relationship of people to land. If that is off-kilter, shall we say, then everything else will be off-kilter.
January 1975, bulldozers were planned and ready to come in and invade once again the ancestral land of our tupunas. It was a subdivision planned only for those who are rich, and consequently we saw it as a threat to us as a people, that once again we will see what happened in 1950, where we would be bulldozed and burnt and extinguished again. We decided that we will fight this plan, and we have succeeded.
The Ngāti Whātua tribe of the Auckland area have been dispossessed of virtually all traditional land by urban development. The eviction scenes from the Bastion Point documentary have been seen around the world and have helped mobilize public opinion. Subdivision plans have been halted, and renewed legal challenges seeking redress for Ngāti Whātua land claims are in progress. While tribal custom may have restricted a woman's role as orator or carver, no such strictures apply to filmmaking.
Now, the area of film there was a definite opening there for women, because it wasn't so restricted by tradition. It didn't have to be a man behind the camera. And so I have found that to my advantage, that I could use the same devices that they use on the marae, you know, which are tapu for women, but I could get behind the camera and address the nation as a man would.
The Maori fight to maintain a toehold on their own land has resulted in special Maori television programs, including a daily 10-minute Maori language newscast.
The Maori language is heard in New Zealand. It's the only place in the world that it belongs to. So it has a place in television and radio in this country. It has a right. And secondly, things that happen in Maoridom, which would not normally make the news bulletins, the network news bulletins, are being seen, and there's an active interest by other members of the community.
At least 50% of Maori women who live in Auckland do not know who they are, where they're from, or they don't understand Maori, nor do they speak Maori. And they've cut themselves off, they've disconnected themselves off from the strength of tribal kinship or family kinship. And so, you know, we have a situation that is very, very grim.
If you look closely at what's happening with the Te Kohangarewa language nest, you see that Māori people are beginning to wake up and to wipe the sleep from their eyes and to raise their sights again.
The Language Nest Preschool, or Kohanga Reo, is a key ingredient in the struggle of modern Maoridom. It is based on the traditional extended family concept, whereby tribal elders, or tupuna, care for the young and provide instruction in Maori language and values. This community-based program has spread the length and breadth of Aotearoa. In 7 years, 800 Kohanga now serve 6,000 children in a process that restores dignity to the elderly, promotes healing for the alienated, and equips children with a positive Maori self-image. Harai McIver explains the basis for Kohanga Reo knowledge.
I te ngākau Māori, I roto I oku nei whakatupuranga. O maingia e nei, ki o mātou tūpuna, heke noa, ki o mātou mātua, tai mai ki a mātou, putara wātu ki a mātou tamariki, kei roto I te ngākau, tēnei āhuatanga Māori, tūturu.
You can't isolate Te Kohanga Reo from the strong political movement of the people. And to me, it is also doubly rewarding to see the recognition of the role of Māori women in the society. Māori women, of course, have always been the authors and the repositories of our culture. And through the culture, that essentially we are talking about the language That has been their role, to have that recognised, to have our children speaking the language again.
Ai kena pe kei engari kei te pai. Te wairua Maori, e kore ngaro te wairua Maori. I roto i ngā tamariki, tīmata mai, i a rātou e nohi nohi ana, pake keno. Ki te mohi o rātou i tō rātou Maori, te reo Maori, te tikanga Maori, e kore ngaro i a rātou. Kore tonu e ngaro i a rātou, pake keno o rātou.
The success of Kohanga Reo has challenged officials to establish language programs in the school system. Richmond School represents a major experiment in bilingual education. Both Maori and Pacific Island children are encouraged to speak their native tongue and are taught English as a second language.
But even the first day I started at a little Maori school up north, my first name is a Maori name, it's Raumori. And they wouldn't. They just said, can't pronounce it. And it was called a native school in those days, so it was a Maori school, you see. And the headmaster, and I can remember, and it's quite a long time ago, him saying, can't pronounce it, called her by her second name, which is Viola. And my grandmother, who couldn't say the V's, called me Waiora, which is a lovely name. It means living water and all, you know, really good. So I call and I know now I like Waiora because I can hear someone calling it. But it just shows you how, you know, from the first day I realised that as a Maori, my name wasn't worth anything.
Well, my own inadequacy, really, in Maori, because like many people of my generation, we came through school not having learned Maori because our parents were persuaded not to speak Maori. However, my youngest daughter qualifies this year for the bilingual class we had. She came home last night speaking Maori to me. And that's, I hope, how I'm going to do something about my inadequacy, because I'll have a developing resource. It's one of the big effects of the Kohanga Reo movement, the Maori language preschool movement, that non-Maori speaking adults are learning to speak Maori. It's one of the powerful grassroots things that is catching up with adults.
That's all part of the challenges of being a Maori in a changing world. Maori people are travelling people. You know, we've taken many journeys, and this is probably the most significant journey that we could ever take. It's the realisation that our own future is destined by ourselves, not by a paddle, but by our minds.
As the Tai Tokerau people of the Northland gather at the Waitangi Marae on the Bay of Islands to welcome Hokulea, the historic event is documented for future generations.
The old people have gone to their graveyard. They have taken the language, they have taken the history, they have taken everything and left us in this generation with nothing. We have people in TV areas, we have people in the newspaper, we have people in radio like myself, and I believe that it'll help preserve a lot of my Maori history, my heritage.
Toki, 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 Toki.
We're trying to show New Zealanders on television something of the beauty and complexity and richness of what it is to be Maori. One of the things that the series has in common with the Hokulea voyage is that it's a voyage of self-discovery.
This is the Maori war canoe, Ngā Toki Matawhāorua of Waitangi. It's going out to meet the Hokulea, a replica of an ancient canoe of Polynesia. Here, the past meets the present. The meeting of Ngā Toki Matawhāorua and Hokulea is historic. A Maori tohunga of the oceans is on board the big visitor. He and the Maori paddlers and the Hawaiians who sailed Hokulea are distant kin, descendants of the same ancestors who, over 2,000 years ago, left their Hawaii and sailed to the most northern and southern islands of Polynesia.
They're now looking at themselves and asking the question, who am I? What am I? Where are my roots? And just now, they are starting to find their roots. They're coming back to the rural areas, to their tribal areas. They're now starting to learn about genealogy, their association with the land, and it's only through this that they will be able to reestablish and find their, what we call the tūranga waiwai, or the place where one could stand.
A lot of people who don't look at anything other than Western culture, for whom the idea of culture is the Renaissance. It's written literature. It may be films, but it's probably sculpture and painting. Culture is much, much more than that. Culture is success. People who have successful cultures survive, they thrive, they create arts, they create ways of living together, they adapt to the environment. And that's what Maoris did, that's what Eastern Polynesian people did, that's what Polynesians all over the Pacific did. And I think if I've come to understand anything, it's to appreciate the beauty of that survival strategy, their skills. They were sophisticated, intelligent, clever people. They learnt about the land, they learnt to understand it, they learnt eventually to protect it, and they learnt to survive and create a culture that had as much philosophy, as much understanding of human relations as any culture you could name.